Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling a really fascinating and important topic.
Uh-huh.
It's all about first impressions,
Okay.
and specifically how those first few seconds of meeting someone can actually make or break social interactions for people with autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah. Yeah.
ASD,
Right?
we've been digging into some recent research on ASD and social perception, and
Interesting.
honestly, some of the findings were kind of surprising, even to me.
Oh, wow.
And our goal today is to really unpack all of this for you,
Right.
to help you understand those kind of hidden dynamics that can have such a big impact.
Absolutely.
So to jump right in,
Okay.
one of the things that really stood out in the research was this consistent negative bias
Yeah.
in how neurotypical folks,
Right.
people whose brains function in a way that's considered, I guess, typical,
Yeah.
perceive individuals with ASD.
And this isn't just like a one-off thing. Research has shown this negative bias over and over again. And it's not just limited to one age group either.
So you're saying this impacts both kids and adults with ASD.
Exactly. It's something that seems to be pretty pervasive across the board.
That's pretty disheartening to hear.
Yeah.
You'd hope that as people got to know each other better,
Yeah.
that initial bias might fade.
Right.
But is that actually what happens?
Unfortunately, not really.
Uh,
Even with repeated exposure, getting to know someone over time, that initial impression,
yeah.
it tends to stick around. It's
Huh.
almost like there's this hurdle.
Yeah, this invisible barrier.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that
Yeah, what is it?
this bias,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't seem to be about what people with ASD are saying. It's
Mhm.
more about how they're saying it.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So their communication style
Right.
is really what's making that first impression.
Yeah, it's a big factor.
Wow.
And this is where things like facial expressions and body language,
Yeah.
even just a photograph.
Hold on. You're saying that even a static image
Yes,
can trigger this bias.
it can.
That's wild.
It really highlights
It really does.
how deep-seated these reactions are.
When you think about the impact of all of this,
Yeah,
it's kind of a lot to process.
it is.
I mean, imagine for a second being in the shoes of someone with ASD
Okay.
and constantly encountering people who are less likely to initiate a conversation with you,
Mm-hmm.
who seem uncomfortable,
Right.
who maybe even avoid you.
Yeah,
That must be incredibly isolating.
it is. And unfortunately, that's the reality for a lot of individuals with ASD. Those negative first impressions, they really do lead to fewer opportunities for connection.
Fewer chances to just have those everyday interactions that most of us take for granted.
Exactly.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So we're seeing this clear pattern of negative bias
Yeah.
and a real impact on people's lives.
Mhm.
But what is it specifically about the communication style of people with ASD that's causing this reaction?
Well, that's where things get a bit more complicated. There's no single easy answer.
Oh,
It's really a combination of factors.
okay.
Things like atypical prosody, which refers to the rhythm and intonation of speech.
Okay.
So how someone's voice rises and falls as they speak.
Yeah.
Differences in facial expressions, maybe not making eye contact in the same way.
Well,
Body posture, even things like grooming habits.
so it's a whole range of things.
Exactly.
And I guess it's important to remember that we're not just talking about challenges that a person with ASD might be experiencing.
Right.
We're also talking about how other people are perceiving and reacting to those differences.
It's crucial to recognize that social interaction is a two-way street.
Yeah, I like that. Two-way street. Because it really makes you rethink that traditional approach of solely focusing on improving social skills in individuals with ASD.
Right.
Like, it's not enough to just say, hey, you need to act more neurotypical.
Exactly.
We need to go beyond that.
Absolutely.
So what are we suggesting?
Well, while developing social skills is definitely important for individuals with ASD,
Sure.
we can't stop there. We need to educate neurotypical folks about ASD and about those unconscious biases.
It's funny. I was reading an article the other day about how
Yeah,
our brains are kind of wired to categorize things
absolutely.
and make quick judgments.
Right.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's a survival mechanism.
Right. Like back in the day, we needed to quickly assess if something was a threat or not.
Exactly.
But those same mechanisms can lead to prejudice and bias.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So I guess what you're saying is we need to be more aware of those automatic reactions
We do.
and challenge them.
Right. And imagine a world where we celebrate, different communication styles
Okay.
rather than trying to force everyone into the same mold.
I love that idea.
It's about embracing neurodiversity,
Yeah.
recognizing that there's no one right way to communicate.
And appreciating the unique strengths and perspectives that individuals with ASD bring to the table.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up here, what would you say are the key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Well, I'd say the biggest one is that first impressions matter, like a lot.
Yeah.
And for people with ASD, those first few seconds can be heavily influenced by these unconscious biases.
Which sadly can make it much harder for them to connect with others and build those relationships we all need.
Right.
So we need to be aware of that
Absolutely.
and challenge our own biases.
Yes. And remember, social interaction is a two-way street.
Love that.
We all have a part to play in creating a more inclusive and welcoming environment.
So I'm going to leave our listeners with one final thought to chew on.
Okay.
What small changes can you make in your daily life to be more aware of those biases and to create a more welcoming and inclusive world for individuals with ASD?
It's about taking that first step, no matter how small.
Because even those small steps can make a big difference. And if we all do our part, we can create a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and accepted for who they truly are.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Until next time.